Tales of enormous sea creatures, bloodthirsty giants, and other mythical beasts and creatures have existed ever since we humans inhabited the earth. But did they actually exist, or is it just tales? Chapter 1: Vampires. A modern vampire is often described to be an undead human that feeds on his victims by sucking their blood, and one of the most famous vampires is of course Count Dracula. Vampires are said to not have any reflection, they hate garlic, can't be in the sunlight, and they can't enter a house without the permission from the owner. These were just a few features of a modern vampire, but in the end we all know that vampires are just fiction and that they have never existed. Well, that is not actually true. Many cultures throughout history actually believed that vampires were real. Tales of terrifying creatures that consume the blood and flesh of the living have existed for thousands of years, but instead of undead humans, these creatures was actually said to be evil spirits or demons. The Persians were one of the first civilizations to have tales of blood-drinking demons, and several pottery shards from the Persian Empire that depicts blood-drinking creatures have been found. The more modern vampire that we know of today originates from the early 18th century in southeastern Europe. In most cases, a vampire had been a suicide victim or a witch in their previous life. A evil spirit could also possess a corpse, and of course, if a person was bitten by a vampire, they would also be transformed into a vampire. Although vampires were generally described to be undead, some folktales spoke of them as living beings. In the early 18th century, beliefs of vampires caused mass hysteria, and public executions of citizens who were accused of being vampires became common. 18th century vampires were described to be bloated in appearance, with a dark purplish skin tone. If a lot of cattle, sheep, relatives or neighbors died at a specific area, it meant that the vampire were active in that area. Although modern vampires are vulnerable to sunlight and only hunts at night, 18th century vampires were actually not vulnerable to sunlight and could attack people during the day, but they were however believed to be more active during the night. In order to protect themselves from vampires, many people put mustard seeds on the roof of their house with the thought that it would keep the vampires away. They could also use a branch from a wild rose or a hawthorn plant, which was said to harm vampires. People of course also used crucifixes and holy water to protect themselves from vampires. There were many different rituals to identify a vampire, such as leading a virgin boy on a virgin horse through a graveyard. If the horse stopped at the grave and refused to go any further, then that was a sign that the grave belonged to a vampire. Holes in the earth or a grave were also a sign of vampirism. People would also often go around graveyards and open graves to check the corpses for any signs that suggested that they were actually a vampire. A vampire in a coffin would often have blood seeping from its mouth. Its left eye was sometimes open. Its teeth, hair and nails could also sometimes have grown somewhat. The corpse would also have a healthier appearance and show little or no signs of decomposition. To prevent a vampire to rise from its grave, many corpses were buried upside down, and the townsfolk would often cut off the legs of the corpse. People would also sometimes spread sand or different seeds on the grave, just because they thought that the vampire would have to count all the fallen grains, which would keep the vampire occupied all night. The vampire's head, body or clothes could also be spiked and pinned to the earth to prevent rising. In Romania and Italy, citizens believed that vampires had to chew their way out of their coffin. So to prevent this, people would force large bricks into the mouth of the corpse they thought would rise as a vampire. In Bulgaria, vampires were said to be vulnerable to metal objects, and over 100 skeletons with metal objects embedded in the torso have been discovered. To kill a vampire, most people used a wooden stake and staked the vampire through its heart or mouth. They would also often cut off the head of the vampire and bury the head between the feet. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you liked the first episode of my new series. And if you did, a like would be very appreciated. Also don't forget to comment down below on which mythical beast or creature that you want me to do next. Take care and I will see you in my next video.